Hey there, viewers. The courtroom was already tense, but no one expected what happened next. After a victim linked Oprah to Diddy's infamous FO parties, she collapsed in front of everyone. The reaction was instant, and the questions it raised are even bigger. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The tape they didn't erase. I never planned on being part of anything like this. I just fix sound. That's all I do. Been doing it since back when I was patching blown club speakers with duct tape and soldering half-melted wires in my cousin's garage. These days I work in a clean lab with noise-canceling walls, fingerprint entry, and coffee that always tastes like it was brewed yesterday. But the job's the same. They hand me old audio, sometimes court-ordered surveillance, sometimes confiscated drives, and I clean them up. That's what I'm good at. Pulling whispers from static. Making ghosts speak. They don't tell me where the tapes come from most of the time. I'm not supposed to ask. But a few weeks ago, I got a batch that came in with a different kind of tension behind it. Heavy black box, multiple seals, FBI initials etched in red. I signed the chain of custody log like always, noticed the new clearance level, Class B2, locked, and rolled it into Bay 3. That's the secure one. Lead walls, redundant power, and air-gapped system. They were serious this time. There were 23 VHS tapes in the box. Most had tags that matched the standard inventory system, date, location, event code. I recognized some. Names I'd seen pop up in public reports, private jet party, after-hours gala, a couple birthday functions. All tied to Diddy in one way or another. But one tape was different. Just plain black. No label on the spine, only a small scratched sticker near the reel that said R24S. No metadata entry. That was already unusual. I almost skipped it, figured it was a bad dupe or an old transfer reel that got mixed in. But something about the silence of it made me curious. I loaded it into the clean deck, adjusted the tracking, and hit play. The tape was damaged, really damaged. Warped on the edges, glitchy video, audio channels muffled. But it wasn't blank. About 15 seconds in, I started hearing something. It was faint. Low laughter, like a group murmuring behind a thick wall. Then a man's voice came through, clipped but distinct, like he was checking off a list. Then more laughter, something glass clinking, and then a whimper. He leaned in, boosted the mid-range EQ, ran a noise gate filter, cut the left channel to isolate the vocals. The next part hit harder than anything I'd ever processed. There was a woman speaking, not loud, not shouting, just talking low, almost conversational, soft but confident, like someone who wasn't performing for the room. Her voice had a rhythm to it, rounded, elegant vowels, a pause after certain words. It was calm, but it made my skin crawl. The only full sentence I could pick out was, "They only stay when they feel seen." That was it. No context, just that. I sat back and let the reel spin. On the screen, the footage was black and white, grainy. Most of the room wasn't even visible. Just a low-angle shot aimed at someone's knees, a carpeted floor, and a vent in the upper corner. I could hear faint music underneath it all, almost like a jazz riff looped through a low-quality speaker. But that voice, I knew I'd heard it before. I didn't say it out loud, but in my head I started running names, and only one stuck. I scrubbed the audio. Ran a waveform match against public voice profiles from archived interviews, took a sample from a 1997 commencement speech and ran it against the clip. Then, I tried a match against a segment from an old book club reel. 94.8% match. Not enough for court, but enough to freeze me in place. I stared at the waveform on screen. My ears were ringing, even though the lab was quiet. I ran the comparison again. Still, high confidence. I didn't want to believe it. I wasn't even supposed to be making identifications. That wasn't my job. Still, I made a folder, labeled it interview_candidate XWIF, and put the clip inside. Then I saved a second copy onto my offline drive just in case. Technically a violation, I know, but something in my gut told me this might disappear if I didn't. I flagged the official file as unrecoverable audio, marked it as low priority processing backlog, and moved on, at least on paper. But I couldn't stop thinking about that phrase, "They only stay when they feel seen." I replayed it in my mind all night. The tone, the way the scene was stretched, like she was speaking about something specific, something orchestrated. The next day, I logged the tape back into the vault, but I didn't report the voice match. I thought maybe I'd bring it up at the next debriefing, but when the time came, I stayed silent. There were too many questions I didn't want to be asked. I kept working through the rest of the tapes. Birthday parties, music sessions, jet rides. Some of them were worse than I expected. Not in what they showed, but in what they didn't. Gaps in footage, sudden jumps in timestamp. Audio that clearly had been clipped mid-sentence. It wasn't sloppiness, it was curated silence. Whoever had redacted these knew what they were doing, and they didn't expect anyone to notice. But the R24's tape hadn't been touched. I think someone forgot to scrub it. Maybe it was misfiled and bypassed the initial review. Or maybe someone left it in there on purpose, like a breadcrumb, a warning, or a message. A few nights later, I was leaving late, past 2 a.m. The lab was cold, fluorescent lights still humming even though the hallway was empty. I stopped by the records office just to recheck the archive log. R24's still wasn't listed. No entry, no history. It was like it had never existed. But I knew it had. I could still hear that voice in my ears. I stepped outside, into the parking lot. The air hit me cold and sharp. I stood there a moment, just staring up at the sky, not thinking, just listening. The world felt too quiet. "If that's her," I whispered to no one. The whole case just changed. I didn't sleep that night, but I backed up the file one more time. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. But I can't unhear it now. And that's the thing about sound. Once it's heard, it lives in you. The victim identifies the voice. It was the kind of silence that settled into your clothes, that court-issued hush that wrapped around your shoulders the minute you passed through security, like even your thoughts had to go through clearance. They had pulled the shades down, locked every external camera feed. No press, no phones, no observers. Only 3 people in the gallery. One of them was her lawyer. I sat at the prosecution table, spine straight, palms flat against a file that felt heavier than anything I'd handled in my 10-year career. I've tried some of the worst trafficking cases in this country. I've read hotel receipts soaked in red ink, listened to girls scream into pillows on low-grade audio, watched grainy footage of children lined up like they were waiting for roll call. I know what power looks like when it's used as a weapon. But this one was different. Victim 14 wasn't supposed to testify. She was a ghost in the system for years. Her file was more redaction than substance. No last name, no real country of origin, no birth certificate. Only a string of coded transfers. Miami, St. Bart's, Nassau, back to Miami, then silence. She appeared 2 months ago under international witness protection, flown in by a diplomatic agreement we weren't allowed to mention on record, the kind of thing that only happens when someone high enough finally gets scared. She stepped into the room quietly, small frame, long sleeves despite the heat, eyes that didn't dart or tremble, just fixed, focused. I'd seen victims disassociate before, float above their own story. But she wasn't floating. She was here. And when she began to speak, the air changed. "I remember the flight to St. Bart's," she said, voice even, almost rehearsed. "They said it was for training, They always called it that. What kind of training? I asked, failing. The house there, it wasn't like the ones in Miami. It wasn't a party house. It was quiet, no cameras, no music, just the sound of the ocean. And the I didn't ask her to explain what rituals meant. I've learned that some things only show themselves when they're ready. There was a room, she continued, a theater almost, with red velvet chairs and a projector screen. We weren't allowed to look behind us, but we heard them. We always heard them. She shook her head slowly. No, her. The judge glanced over her glasses at me. I knew that look. Careful now. Describe her, I said, gently. She never gave a name. They called her Mother, or the Crown. When she entered, no one spoke. Not even him. Did she participate? That was the question that mattered. The one I needed for the grand jury. The one the defense would use to tear her apart. No, she said. She watched. That's what made it worse. The others, they played roles. But her? She was the reason the room behaved. She didn't need to touch anyone to own the whole moment. There was something about the way she said it, like she was describing a statue that could breathe, a presence that didn't belong in the same world as the rest of us. I glanced at the court reporter. She looked pale. I leaned closer to the mic. Do you believe you would recognize her voice if you heard it again? Victim 12 didn't answer immediately. She looked down, hands in her lap. Her fingers had tiny crescent scars along the knuckles, like they had once curled too tight, too often. Then she looked at me. I've dreamed it every night for 15 years. I turned toward the monitor. The AV tech queued up the clip, just the cleaned audio from the R24S tape, no video, that had been deemed too corrupted, too vague. I kept the speaker low, just loud enough for her to hear. The voice came through. That soft, rounded tone. The phrase was clear this time. They only stay when they feel seen. Victim 12 flinched. Her face twitched once. Then her lips parted, like she couldn't breathe. That's her, she said. You're certain? She nodded once, slow, like the truth itself had weight. That's the one they said we'd never name, the one that would outlive the rest? The courtroom seemed to collapse inward. Even the air conditioning felt like it stopped. The court reporter looked at the judge, then at me. The judge picked up her pen, then put it down. No one said anything. Log this under secondary clearance, the judge said. From this point on, session is sealed under Rule 7. No public record. I could feel it ripple. The panic, the unspoken recognition. The court-marshal stepped out into the hallway to notify external security. In the gallery, 2 members of her legal team. The woman stood up. One of them whispered something into a tablet and disappeared into the hallway. The other stayed behind, eyes wide, unblinking, fixed on victim 12 like she was holding a bomb. I leaned in toward the judge. We need a recess, I said. 10 minutes. Take 15, she replied. No press leaves, no phones go on. Lock the chamber. Victim 12 didn't move. She just sat there, like the room had shrunk around her. She looked smaller than she had when she entered. I stepped outside, pacing the hallway. My heart was thudding in my ears. I knew what I had just witnessed. This wasn't a misidentification. This wasn't confusion. That was recognition, pure, unmistakable. And it meant the case had shifted, from a known predator to a protected myth. The woman whose image was carved into the cultural conscience like a saint. The woman who had built empires on healing, on trust, on light, and now, she was the whisper behind the curtain. I knew what was coming. The redactions, the subpoenas, the spin, the firestorm. But I also knew something else. You can't steal a voice once it's been named, not really. And that girl in the chair, she had named it. The Whisper Network collapses. They called me in on a Friday. No name on the invite, just a number I hadn't seen flash across my phone in over a decade. I knew it had to be big, and I knew it had to be bad. They don't dig up fossils like me unless someone's legacy is on fire. The car that picked me up was unmarked, matte black, smelled like new leather and old secrets. We didn't speak on the drive. The driver didn't even look at me, just took the canyon curves like he'd done it 100 times, every wheel turn whispering, "This isn't for outsiders." The lounge was tucked behind one of those pseudo-wellness retreats in Beverly Hills. Looked like a spa on the outside, white marble, calming fonts, a water feature burbling just loud enough to drown out the panic. But inside, it was war. I examined our entire law firm. I walked in and immediately felt the weight of the room. 4 people already seated, all familiar faces in dim lighting. A publicist I once helped bury a scandal involving a missing assistant, a crisis manager known for flipping narratives faster than headlines change, and 2 legal advisors, both from the old guard, both wearing the same kind of tired panic in their eyes. No one said her name, but they didn't have to. The moment I took my seat, someone slid a folder across the table. Slim, black, no seal. I opened it and saw the first line. Voice match, 94.8% confidence. Underneath that, a partial transcript, just one line highlighted. They only stay when they feel seen. I didn't ask where the file came from. I just leaned back, rubbed the bridge of my nose, and let the silence breathe. It hasn't hit the feeds yet, one of them said, voice low. But it will, said another. 3 leaks in 2 hours. 2 paralegals already sent warning emails to outside counsel. She's still sealed under secondary clearance, the crisis manager added. But if the victim's testimony gets subpoenaed in civil court, it won't, said the liar. It might, countered the publicist. You saw the docket addendum. They're preparing for a name drop. That's when I knew the network was collapsing. Not just a rumor, not just another flare-up. This was foundational, and they were scared. They brought up the old files next, ones we all pretended didn't exist. References to FO agreements, the special non-disclosure clauses we crafted for specific satellite events that weren't officially on the calendar. Events held in Cipriani's private vault room, or the St. Bart's property, or that theater in Toronto no one ever speaks of in daylight. I let them talk, until one of them mentioned 2006. Studied that year rang a bell. There was a satellite event, the crisis manager said. Only 8 guests. One of the cameras failed. That's the night the footage was supposedly destroyed. I spoke up then. Voice slow, flat. It wasn't destroyed. It was boxed under discretionary dispersals and logged as redundant archival material. They all stared. You're saying it still exists? I nodded. I wrote the clause myself, shielded certain parties from being named in any related arbitration, criminal or civil. I used initials only. O.W. Among them, you ghost wrote her clause? I didn't blink. I ghost wrote the myth. There was a long pause. One of the attorneys exhaled like she was deflating. The moment her name becomes searchable in court logs, she whispered, we all burn. They didn't mean that poetically. They meant it literally. Careers, deals, endowments. Brand alignments built over 40 years on the image of a woman who was never supposed to be in these kinds of rooms. She was light, she was healing, she was absolution. And now she was the voice behind a sealed file labeled Class B2 locked. No one touched their drinks. The ice in my glass had already melted, condensation bleeding into the napkin like sweat. Then someone's phone buzzed. One of the producers. He glanced at the screen, went pale, and said, "It's her." He didn't answer, just held up the speaker, pressed play, and let the room listen. Her voice was calm, perfectly pitched, no fear, just intent. "If they speak my name," she said, "you know what to do." The message ended. No one said a word. I stood, adjusted my coat, and took one last look around. A room full of titans, all crumbling under the weight of a name they couldn't say out loud. The Whisper network had lasted decades, but tonight, it cracked. Not from the outside, from the inside, from the moment they realized the myth couldn't hold anymore. Not when the voice matched, not when the girl pointed, not when the truth outlived the silence. I walked out alone. The car was still waiting. Geography. The letter from the island. They told me not to use names. They told me to write it all down as carefully as I could, and to avoid using anything that could be traced. No dates, no surnames, no countries. Just what I saw. What I remember. So that's what I did. I wrote it with a pen that skipped sometimes, on lined government paper that smelled like cardboard and metal. My handwriting got shaky the deeper I went, not because I was scared of what I was writing, but because I was scared of what I was remembering. They're calling me Isla now. That's the name they gave me when they moved me from San Juan to this place, wherever this place is. They don't tell you when you're in protection, you just wake up somewhere else. New sheets, new shampoo, new story. But I remember the island. I was 23 when I took the job. Private chef, contract only, high pay, limited disclosure. They flew me in blindfolded. I remember the scent of the air when I stepped off the boat. Salt and citrus. But underneath it was something else. Like lilies and ammonia. Too clean, too controlled. They called it a wellness retreat, invitation-only therapy circles. Everything was coded like that. The guests arrived in pairs, sometimes alone, never with luggage, only with envelopes. I wasn't allowed to speak to them. I barely made eye contact, but I cooked for them, carefully, precise. Menus were assigned with symbols, not names. I remember them clearly even now. A silver triangle, a broken circle, a small black crown. The crown. That one appeared on 3 menus during my time there. I only saw the guest once, at night. I was walking back to the kitchen compound after finishing the second course of the midnight meal. I saw her pass through the hallway between the mirrored garden and the screening room. She didn't look at me. She didn't walk like someone afraid to be seen. She walked like she was walking through her own memory. Slow, silent, composed. A staff member behind her adjusted her coat like she was royalty, but she didn't flinch. Her face was half hidden in shadow, but I remember the eyes. They weren't sad, they weren't angry. They were full, like she had lived through 1,000 storms and had learned how to keep her umbrella closed. The mirrored room was where they hosted the reflection sessions. Only selected guests were allowed inside. The staff weren't permitted past the double doors. The first time I heard that phrase, "The crown is in session," was during a thunderstorm. The lights flickered, but no one moved, not even the guards. It was like her presence had stilled the weather. There was one night that haunts me still. I had just delivered a tray of fruit compote and flower tea to the main hallway. I left it on the credenza like I was instructed. As I turned to walk back, I heard something. Not laughter, not screams, just weeping. Not one person, a room full. All at once. It came from the mirrored room, thick, heavy crying, and through the small open vent I heard her voice. Just a sentence. Not loud, not sharp, just low, warm, and final. They will forget your face, but not your silence. Then, the crying stopped, like it had been rehearsed. I ran back to the kitchen, wrote it down in my journal that night. She spoke with the weight of the world. I don't know what they were doing, but when she left, everyone wept. It was paid in cash, sealed envelopes, no thank yous, no feedback. After my third assignment, they told me I was dismissed. I signed a final document I wasn't allowed to read fully, and they flew me back to Miami. I never cooked again after that. Couldn't. Every time I held a knife, my hand trembled. When the lawsuits started piling up against him, against Diddy, I knew it would only be a matter of time before someone whispered about the island. I waited, stayed quiet, changed jobs, tried to forget. But I couldn't. Not when the girl in the news, victim 12, mentioned the St. Bart's property. Not when she said there was a woman who made everyone behave without saying a word. I wrote the letter. Didn't use names. Just symbols. Just memories. I submitted it through the federal contact assigned to my case. The officer, a woman named Carla, read it in silence. When she finished, she shook her head. "This won't be admissible," she said. "It's too emotional. It's not evidence." "It's the only thing I have," I replied. She folded the paper, placed it in a second folder, and said she'd send it up the chain. I don't know if she meant that literally, or if that was just her way of saying it would be buried. But someone else read it. I know because it leaked. Not the whole letter, just parts. A line here, a phrase there. Someone took pieces of it and stitched them into a whisper campaign. They didn't attach my name, but they quoted my words. That sentence about the weeping, I saw it posted on a black and white graphic on a page I didn't follow. She spoke with the weight of the world. That's what the post said. No photo, just text. Below it, the crown. That was 2 days ago. This morning, the staff here changed. New guard rotation. Different case manager. One of them told me I'd be moved again soon. Different safe house. Different country. I asked why. He didn't answer. But I know why. Because now they're looking for the crown. And because my letter might have been the first stone. I don't want fame. I don't want credit. I just wanted someone to know that I saw her, that she was real, that the stories weren't all inventions of damaged minds. I saw her walk into that room, and when she left, everything was quiet. The room smelled like takeout and printer toner. I hadn't left in 21 hours. The only light came from the glow of my laptop and the lamp in the corner flickering like it was trying to warn me. It was 3:02 a.m. The hearing was in less than 9 hours, but I knew they wouldn't let press inside. Not for this one. Not when the whispers already had teeth. My name doesn't matter. I'm a freelancer. Young, broke, stubborn. I write for outlets that can't afford fact-checkers, which means they only publish the stuff that's already been vetted by someone else, or watered down until it's useless. But I wasn't chasing clicks this time. I was chasing a shadow. The timeline didn't make sense. Not until it did. It started with a photo. One I found in a scanned archive of a fashion blog from 2004. Diddy's birthday party. Velvet ropes, cigars, oversized sunglasses. But in the background, half out of frame, just a reflection in a silver tray, I saw a woman's hand, delicate, with a very specific gold bracelet. I'd seen that bracelet before, on her. At first I thought I was seeing ghosts. Then I remembered the foundation gala that same weekend, a children's literacy fundraiser in San Juan. Big celebrity turnout, including her, the daytime icon. Everyone said she'd flown in from Chicago that day, Attended the gala, flew out at dawn, but the timestamps didn't line up. Tully cross-referenced FAA flight records, privately leased jets using her foundation's holding company, found one that landed in Miami at 3:19 p.m., the day of the gala, then went dark, next pinged near St. Bart's. No log entry, no customs record, just a blank 2-hour window. That same weekend, a known FO satellite was held on the island, one of the quieter ones. No footage, no audio, no arrests, just murmurs in sealed reports I wasn't supposed to have access to. But I did. A jet, a bracelet, a gap in the itinerary. I laid it all out. Timeline, images, quotes. I didn't say her name. Didn't have to. The silhouette was loud enough. I wrote the piece. 3,000 words. My best work. Careful, calculated. Everything circumstantial, but every line bleeding truth. I sent it to my editor. He didn't reply right away. Then he did, one line only. You don't accuse gods of sins, you thank them for the rain. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I closed the email and opened a private window. The thread was ready in 20 minutes. I posted it from a dummy account I'd set up years ago. 1 follower. No profile pic, just words, image overlays, timelines, cross-tagged archive links. No names, just patterns. It took off fast. Within an hour, people were already filling in the blanks. They weren't asking if, they were asking how long. The comment count grew by the second. Retweets, shares, subreddit threads popping like firecrackers. Every few minutes, someone would reply with a photo I'd never seen. Another angle, another confirmation. No face ever shown. But the bracelet kept showing up. By 5 a.m., the thread had reached a journalist I actually respected. Someone who used to write exposés before she got bought out by a media group tied to an entertainment mogul. She didn't comment, just liked the thread, then unliked it 5 minutes later. Knew then it had touched something. At 6:17 a.m. my inbox lit up, not from friends, not from family, from strangers. Some supportive, some threatening, some curious. A few links to podcasts already recording emergency episodes. A few messages just said, "Thank you." Then I got the one that made my blood go cold. It was from an account with no name. No followers, no posts, just one message. You weren't wrong, but you'll need to disappear soon. They're already spinning it as AI generated. That was all. Time to stare at the message for a long time. I checked the thread again. Someone had posted a manipulated version of one of my images, claiming it was a deepfake. Others jumped on it. Debate flooded the timeline. Doubts, arguments, noise. That's how it always starts. Not with a scream, with static. But I knew the truth. I knew the bracelet. I knew the silence wasn't silence anymore. It was thunder, slow and building. Legends don't break in one moment. They crack first. A line through the marble, a shift in the foundation, something too small to notice until the whole statue collapses. And I had lit the fuse. Chapter 6. Sealed room, sealed names. The courtroom had a different feel that day. Not louder, not more crowded, just tighter, as if the walls had moved in a few inches overnight. I've been in enough sealed sessions to know when something has changed, when the tension isn't about what's being said, but about who's finally listening. My name doesn't matter. I was there as a translator, contracted for French and Portuguese with enough Spanish to navigate the nuances when things got blurred. My job was to sit in that quiet little box behind the monitor and listen, not interpret feelings, not ask questions, just render words faithfully with no judgment. That's what I'm paid for. But that day, something slipped past the language. She brought her in through a side entrance. No media knew, no press alert, no cameras. I only knew because the air changed. You don't expect someone like her to just walk in and sit down like everyone else, but that's what she did. Pale, quiet, heavy with something no one could name, her hands folded tight in her lap. No entourage, just two legal reps in sharp suits and dead eyes. She didn't speak, not even a whisper of small talk, and she never looked at the screens. The first testimony came in from a woman in Lyon, late 30s, calm voice, dead stare. She spoke in long, carefully measured French. I matched her tone as best I could. Described the villa in Antibes, the invitation sent out with gold-inked initials, the rule that guests were never to speak to the crowned one. She didn't touch, the woman said, but she sat. And when she sat, no one else dared to move. Next was a girl from Haiti, young, shaking. Her feed kept freezing, but the audio carried. She used Creole French mixed with words I hadn't heard in years, ancient phrases, ones that didn't translate easily. She described a room with mirrors, a woman in silver robes, silence like mass. She was the mother of the hourglass, the girl said. I paused. I didn't know what that meant. Neither did the judge. I glanced at the other interpreter, who shook his head. I offered the best version I could, the one who watched time and blessed its keeping. The courtroom was still. Even the court reporter hesitated before typing it out. Another feed came in from Sao Paulo, a woman who had only ever been referred to in redacted case files as V22. She spoke in quiet Portuguese, steady but with the edge of someone tired of rehearsing pain. She didn't name names, just roles, positions, titles. She talked about the listener, the chooser, and once more, the mother of the hourglass. I stared at the phrase in my notes, trying to make it make sense. It sounded ceremonial, like something passed through whispered rituals. Not just a nickname, a role, an office, a function. And still, the woman at the front table said nothing. Her head was bowed now, her shoulders stiff. The right hand, the one closest to me, had started to tremble. By the third testimony, it was clear the judge had stopped expecting any direct accusations. The witnesses were too careful, the stories too fragmented. But the pattern, that was undeniable. All three mentioned her, not by name, but by presence, by weight. Not the predator, not the handler, the sanctifier. And that was worse somehow. Like she wasn't just there, but above it, apart from it, a holy watcher to something unspeakable. At recess, the room emptied. Only a few of us stayed behind. I stepped out of the booth and into the hallway, needing air I wouldn't find. She was sitting alone on the bench outside the chamber, her lawyers down the corridor in quiet conference. Didn't mean to be near her, I just walked by. But as I passed, I heard her voice. Soft, a whisper, half caught by the wall, the floor, my shoes. It wasn't supposed to reach here, she said. She wasn't talking to me. Maybe she wasn't even talking to anyone. But I heard it. And that was enough. Shah said thoughtfully, because now I can't forget it, no matter how many other hearings I sit through, no matter how many languages I try to hide behind. She said it. She found it. And whatever came next, she knew it was too late to stop it, the collapse. I've worked security at the federal courthouse for almost 18 years, and I've seen every kind of defendant pass through those back halls. Gang leaders, billionaires, doctors with bodies in the basement, even a bishop once who wouldn't stop quoting scripture under his breath. But none of them carried the kind of silence she. They told me at the start of my shift that I'd be posted outside Inner Chamber C, restricted corridor, post-sealed hearing, no media, no cuffs, just presence, protocol. They didn't say who I'd be watching. They never do until the moment comes. But when the door opened and she stepped in, quiet as a dream, I felt it. Not just the weight of who she was, but the way everyone else around her stopped pretending they weren't nervous. She walked like her shoes didn't touch the floor, like the whole building tilted a little when she moved. I'd seen her 100 times through a screen, all smiles and light, but that wasn't what came in today. What came in today was a shell. Pale skin under expensive foundation, eyes dull with something too big to speak. She sat in the holding room without a word. The space was clean, small, metal chair, reinforced window, 2 cameras, 1 file drawer bolted shut. She didn't ask for water, didn't glance around, just folded her hands in her lap and waited. 15 minutes passed before the runner arrived. A kid, maybe 22, nervous, holding a sealed manila envelope with red tape across the flap. He didn't say a word, just slid it across the table to her and backed out like he just dropped a live wire. She stared at it for a long time. It didn't move, didn't blink. And then he opened it. I couldn't see the contents from where I stood, but I caught the edge of something. A black and white photo, curled slightly, looked old. Behind that were a few sheets of paper, typed and handwritten both. I saw her fingers hesitate when they touched the notes. Then the change came. No sobbing, no theatrics, just a stillness that cracked open. Tears rolled down her face like a leak in a dam. Slow, unstoppable. She didn't wipe them away. She just let them fall, one by one, down her cheeks and onto her lap. Her mouth moved slightly, like she was speaking to herself, maybe to someone else who wasn't there. I'd never seen a legend cry before. Her lawyer came in 5 minutes later, mid-40s, calm face, no tie, jacket open. He crouched next to her and placed a hand on her wrist, whispered something. She didn't answer right away. And soft, barely above the hum of the fluorescent lights, she said, "Will they take the children's names public? They'll go under oath. If not, I'll go away." He froze, eyes darted to me. I pretended not to hear. "That's the rule. You don't listen when the weight of something private gets too heavy to carry out loud." But I heard it anyway. Her breathing shifted not long after, shallow, uneven. She leaned forward, elbows sliding off the table, one hand still clutching the envelope. Then her body gave. It wasn't dramatic, just slow, like her bones stopped holding her up. I stepped in, caught her before her head hit the edge. She was conscious, but barely. Eyes rolling, sweat on her neck, skin suddenly cold through her blazer. She called it in. EMTs arrived within 4 minutes. They didn't ask who she was, just did what they were trained to do: stabilize, transport, disappear. No statements, no alerts to the press, just a stretcher and a silence that followed them out of the hallway, like a shadow. Back inside, her envelope stayed on the floor for a few minutes before someone from legal picked it up and tucked it into a black case. No one spoke. But the text started almost immediately. She collapsed, he dead her, or she gave herself away. No one knew which version was true, maybe none of them, maybe all. But as I stood by that door, watching the trail of her tears still drying on the tile, I realized something I didn't want to say out loud. Whatever was in that envelope didn't just break her. It broke the myth, the archives that wait. The air in the vault is always the same, cold, dry, unmoving, like the room decided long ago to stop being part of the world outside. No windows, no clocks, no indication of time passing, just the whir of fluorescent tubes and the sound of my own footsteps echoing off the floor. I used to hate it, now I find it comforting. Like, I'm not supposed to have a name here. Not when I'm on the clock, just an ID badge with a barcode and a clearance level. I log, I sort, I seal, I destroy. That's the job. The room is built for forgetting. Most people think memory is what archives are for, but this place, This place is about containment. We don't keep stories here, we bury them. Today's delivery came through the level 4 drop chute. I wasn't expecting anything new. Most of the FO evidence had already been processed, boxed, redacted, shredded, or sent to departments I'll never know by name. But this one had a different label. Thin handwriting, almost delicate. OW. Source material, pre-trial only. I recognized the initials immediately. I took the box to Bay 9, swiped the card. Door hissed open. I rolled it onto the table under the camera blind spot. Not standard procedure, but some things don't deserve to be logged under glass. The box was heavy, but not large. Inside, everything was wrapped in static-proof film and acid-free envelopes. Tidy, like someone wanted this to be preserved, or at least preserved long enough to be destroyed properly. First, there were the receipts. Dozens of them, spanning 2 decades. Foundation expenses, flights to unnamed islands, catering invoices marked with symbols instead of event titles. One stuck out. A wire transfer to an offshore entity with only a 3-letter code in the memo line. FO. Next, the invitations. Black paper, gold leaf text, no names, just dates and locations. The design was unmistakable, an hourglass shape embedded in the center, barely visible unless the light hit just right. Underneath, in tiny serif font, witness, don't interrupt. Then came the USBs. Encrypted, no labeling, just numbers and a rotating 5-digit PIN protocol. I didn't have clearance to open them, and even if I did, I wouldn't have tried. Around here, curiosity doesn't just kill, it buries. And finally, the folder, thicker than the rest. Bound in a material that felt too soft to be leather. The cover read, "The Crown, for internal reconciliation only." No barcode, no classification stickers, just those words. I stared at it for a long time. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a letter, maybe a confession. But what I found inside were images, stills pulled from old footage, faces blurred, rooms dim, but always, one figure at the edge, never in focus, never speaking, but unmistakably present. The folder included an internal memo, unsigned. If memory persists in unofficial channels, this file is to be eliminated under the old code. Observe, absorb, erase. As due the protocol is clear. Really burn everything. So I did. One by one, I fed the materials into the chute. Watched the thermal core ignite. The paper crumbled fast. The USBs snapped with a hiss. The folder's cover peeled like skin. I logged the destruction manually. No digital record. That was part of the design. Except for one thing. At the bottom of the box, under a false panel, was a tape. Real magnetic tape, analog, labeled in the same handwriting as the box. R24S, master copy. There. I held it in my hands for a full minute. Technically, I was supposed to incinerate it. No exceptions. But something about the weight of it, the fact that it had been hidden, that someone had gone through the trouble of tucking it beneath everything else, made me pause. I didn't watch it. That would have been crossing a line even I wouldn't touch. But I knew what it was. I'd heard rumors about the voice, about the phrase, about the girl who named her without ever speaking her name. I slipped the tape into a new envelope, wrote no return address, printed a shipping label to an old archival library in southern France, one that still accepts anonymous materials of potential historical significance. Then I mailed it. By the time it arrives, it'll either be buried again or unearthed by someone willing to hear what was never meant to be said out loud. Back in the vault, I sat at the table and stared at the empty box. Some names were never meant for court. but they were never meant to vanish either.